Capture and deception. The harsh winds of Proxima Centauri beheld across the barren landscape, kicking up swirls of red dust that danced in the dim light of the distant sun. Amidst the desolate terrain, a small figure darted between rocky outcroppings, her movements swift and purposeful despite her apparent youth. Emily, to all outward appearances a human girl of no more than 13 years, paused to catch her breath. Her tattered clothes and dirt-streaked face painted a picture of desperation, but her eyes told a different story. They scanned the horizon with a calculated precision that belied her youthful exterior. For Emily was not what she seemed. Beneath her skin of synthetic flesh pulsed a network of advanced circuitry and reinforced endoskeleton. She was a weapon, disguised as a child, sent to infiltrate and dismantle the alien slave trade that had been plaguing human colonies on the fringes of explored space. A distant rumble caught her attention. Emily's enhanced hearing picked up the telltale sound of approaching hover engines. Her lips tightened into a grim line, right on schedule. As the alien slaver ship crested the horizon, Emily allowed herself a moment of trepidation. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. Everything hinged on her ability to play the part of a frightened, helpless human child. The ship, a hulking mass of corroded metal and pulsing energy fields, cast a dark shadow over the landscape as it descended. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Then, with practiced precision, she stumbled out from her hiding place, letting out a convincing wail of terror. The effect was immediate. A hatch on the underside of the ship slid open, and 3 figures dropped to the ground. They were Zoxarians, a species known for their involvement in the intergalactic slave trade. Their scaled skin shimmered in various shades of green and blue, and their 4 eyes darted about, quickly locking onto Emily's small form. Well, the largest of the 3 growled, his voice a guttural rumble. What have we here? A little human, all alone on this miserable rock. Emily backed away, her eyes wide with feigned terror. Please, he whimpered, don't hurt me. I'm lost. I don't know where my parents are. The Zoxarians exchanged gleeful looks. Oh, we won't hurt you, little one, the leader said, his tone dripping with false sweetness. We're here to help, to take you somewhere safe. As they approached, Emily allowed herself to be cornered against a large boulder. She could have easily outmaneuvered them, could have incapacitated all 3 in a matter of seconds. But that wasn't the mission. She needed to infiltrate their operation, to be taken aboard their ship and sold into slavery. Only then could she gather the intelligence necessary to bring down the entire network. So she played her part, struggling weakly as rough hands grabbed her arms, crying out for parents who didn't exist as she was dragged towards the waiting ship. All the while, her internal systems were mapping every detail of her captors and their vessel, storing the information for future use. Once aboard, Emily was roughly shoved into a small, dimly lit cell. The door clanged shut behind her, and she'd heard the sound of heavy locks engaging. Perfect, she was in. For the next several hours, Emily maintained her facade of terror and despair. She huddled in the corner of her cell, occasionally letting out soft sobs that she knew her captors could hear. All the while, her advanced sensors were hard at work, mapping the ship's layout, analyzing its systems, and eavesdropping on the conversations of the crew. It was during one of these overheard conversations that Emily learned their destination, Coraxis Prime, a bustling hub of illegal activity on the outer rim. It was there that she would be sold to the highest bidder, joining countless other humans and aliens in a life of servitude and suffering, also her captors thought. As the ship hurtled through space, Emily allowed herself a small, grim smile in the darkness of her cell. The real mission was about to begin. Days passed in a blur of simulated fear and careful observation. Emily made sure to flinch whenever a guard approached her cell, to cower and whimper when food was shoved through a small slot in the door. She took note of the guard rotations, the ship's daily cycles, and the hierarchies among the crew. It was on the 3rd day of her captivity that she met Zahn, a younger Zoxarian who seemed to lack the cruel edge of his compatriots. He was assigned to bring Emily her daily rations, and unlike the others, he didn't seem to take pleasure in terrorizing her. "Here," he said gruffly, sliding a tray of unappetizing slop through the slot. "Eat up, you'll need your strength." Emily peered up at him with wide, tearful eyes. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Where are you taking me?" Zahn hesitated, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession. For a moment, Emily thought she detected a flicker of guilt in his expression. "It's better not to ask questions, little one," he said finally. "Just try to stay strong." As he turned to leave, Emily called out softly, "Wait, please. What's your name?" The young Zoxarian paused, clearly torn between protocol and an unexpected surge of compassion. "Zahn," he replied after a moment. "My name is Zahn." Emily offered him a weak smile. "Thank you, Zahn, for being kind." As Zahn hurried away, Emily filed away this interaction in her databanks. Compassion among the enemy could be exploited. It could be a weakness to be used later. The journey to Coraxis Prime took just over a week. During that time, Emily continued to gather information, to study her captors, and to refine her act as a frightened human child. She made sure to lose weight, to let her appearance become more haggard. Her captors needed to believe that the ordeal was taking its toll. Finally, the ship shuddered as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Through the small, grimy window of her cell, Emily caught her first glimpse of Coraxis Prime. It was a world of stark contrasts. Glittering spires of impossible wealth rose from sprawling slums, all surrounded by a sickly yellow atmosphere that spoke of centuries of pollution. As the ship began its descent, Emily heard excited chatter among the crew. They were eagerly anticipating the profits her sail would bring. Little did they know, they were delivering their own destruction right into the heart of their operation. The landing was rough, jostling Emily in her cell. She allowed herself to be thrown to the floor, adding a few scrapes and bruises to enhance her appearance of vulnerability. Soon after, heavy footsteps approached, and her cell door swung open. "On your feet, human," growled a large Zoxarian she recognized as the ship's captain. "It's time to meet your new owners." Emily stumbled to her feet, making sure to sway slightly as if weakened by her ordeal. As rough hands grabbed her arms and dragged her from the cell, she took in every detail of her surroundings. The ship's interior was a maze of corridors and chambers, but her internal mapping systems were creating a perfect schematic for future reference. They emerged onto a landing pad bathed in the sickly yellow light of Coraxis Prime's sun. The air was thick and acrid, and Emily allowed herself a genuine cough. All around them, similar ships were landing or taking off, each one no doubt filled with more unfortunate souls destined for slavery. A group of well-dressed aliens of various species stood waiting nearby, their eyes gleaming with avarice as they surveyed the new merchandise. Emily recognized some of them from intel briefings, high-ranking members of the slave trade, each responsible for countless lives destroyed. As she was led towards this group, Emily caught sight of a familiar face among the crowd of onlookers. It was barely perceptible, a flicker of recognition quickly hidden, but she knew in that instant that she wasn't alone. Somewhere in this teeming hive of scum and villainy, her backup was in place, waiting for her signal. The real mission was about to begin. "And what have we here?" purred a tall, elegantly dressed alien with iridescent scales and 6 limbs. "A human child, and a pretty one at that. She'll fetch a fine price in the pleasure markets of the core worlds." Emily allowed her eyes to widen in genuine horror at the implication. It wasn't difficult to summon real tears as she pleaded, "Please no. I want to go home." The assembled buyers laughed cruelly, clearly relishing her distress. All except one, a hooded figure standing at the back of the group who seemed to tense at Emily's cry. Now, my dear," the 6-limbed alien said, reaching out to stroke Emily's cheek with a clawed hand. "Your home is wherever your new master decides it will be. Best get used to that idea quickly." As the alien's cold fingers touched her skin, Emily had to fight every instinct screaming at her to lash out, to unleash the deadly force coiled within her synthetic muscles. But no, she reminded herself, not yet, the mission comes first. So instead, she flinched away, letting out a soft whimper that seemed to please her tormentors. The bidding would begin soon, and Emily knew that her performance in these crucial moments would determine the success of her mission. As she was led to a raised platform to be displayed to the assembled buyers, Emily caught another glimpse of the hooded figure. For just a moment, she saw a human eye gleaming from within the shadows of the hood, a silent message of support and a reminder that, no matter how alone she might feel, the full force of humanity stood ready to bring this vile operation crashing down. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself for what was to come. The auction was about to begin, and with it, the next phase of her mission. Whatever happened next, she was ready. She was more than just a weapon. She was humanity's vengeance personified, and these slavers would soon learn the cost of underestimating the species they had so grievously wronged. Life among the slavers. The auction block loomed before Emily, a stark symbol of the cruelty that permeated Coraxis Prime. As she was roughly shoved onto the raised platform, her enhanced auditory systems picked up the excited murmurs of the assembled buyers. Their eyes raked over her small form, assessing her value like she was nothing more than a piece of merchandise. "Ladies and gentlemen," boomed the voice of the auctioneer, a corpulent alien with mottled purple skin, "we have a rare treat for you today. A human child, young and unspoiled, perfect for molding to your every whim." Emily fought back a wave of revulsion, forcing herself to maintain her facade of terror and vulnerability. Her gaze darted around the crowd, noting faces, species, and any distinguishing features. Each detail was meticulously recorded in her internal database for future reference. The bidding began in earnest, numbers flying back and forth as the wealthy and powerful vied for the right to own her. Emily allowed her eyes to well up with tears, her small frame shaking with carefully choreographed sobs. She noticed with grim satisfaction how her display of helplessness seemed to drive the bidders into a frenzy. As the prices climbed higher, Emily's attention was drawn to a new arrival. A tall, elegant alien glided through the crowd, its translucent skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns. This was clearly someone of great importance, judging by how the other bidders fell silent and parted to allow it passage. "Ah, Zorax Vex," the auctioneer purred, his tone dripping with obsequious respect. "We are honored by your presence. Might I interest you in this fine specimen?" The alien Zorax Vex fixed Emily with a piercing gaze. Its eyes, multifaceted like those of an insect, seemed to bore into her very soul. For a heart-stopping moment, Emily feared her true nature had been discovered. But then Zorax spoke, its voice a melodious whisper that nonetheless carried across the entire auction house. "Indeed, I will pay double the current highest bid." A gasp rippled through the crowd. The amount Zorax offered was staggering, enough to buy a small starship. The auctioneer, practically salivating at the prospect of such a windfall, quickly brought down his gavel. "Sold to the esteemed Zorax Vex." As Emily was led off the auction block, she caught sight of the hooded figure from earlier. A slight nod was all the communication they could risk, but it was enough. The first phase of her mission was complete. Now came the truly dangerous part. Zorax's estate was a sprawling complex on the outskirts of the city, a oasis of opulence amidst the industrial squalor of Coraxis Prime. As Emily was escorted through its winding corridors, her systems worked overtime, mapping the layout and noting potential escape routes. She was brought to a lavishly appointed room and left alone. Moments later, Zorax entered, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing with what Emily interpreted as excitement. "Welcome, little one," it said, its voice soft but commanding. "I am Zorax Vex, and you belong to me now. What is your name?" Emily huddled in the corner, playing up her fear. Emily," she stammered. Zorax's mouthparts twitched in what might have been a smile. "Emily, A pretty name for a pretty child. You needn't fear me, Emily. I have no interest in harming you. Quite the contrary, you are to be the crowning jewel of my collection. Over the next few days, Emily learned that Zorax was a collector of rare and exotic beings from across the galaxy. Its vast estate housed hundreds of specimens, each more strange and wonderful than the last. Emily was to be displayed in a specially designed habitat, a piece of living art for Zorax and its elite guests to admire. This arrangement, while distasteful, provided Emily with the perfect opportunity to gather intelligence. As she was paraded before Zorax's visitors, she listened intently to their conversations, slowly piecing together a picture of the vast criminal network that fueled the slave trade. She learned of hidden hyperspace routes used to transport slaves, of corrupt officials who turned a blind eye to the suffering, and of vast fortunes built on the backs of countless sentient beings. Each scrap of information was carefully stored away, ready to be transmitted when the time was right. But Emily's act as a traumatized human child was beginning to wear thin. Zorax, for all its outward benevolence, was highly intelligent and observant. More than once, Emily caught it studying her with a look that bordered on suspicion. The breakthrough came nearly 2 weeks into her captivity. Zorax was hosting a grand soiree, and Emily was to be the centerpiece of the evening's entertainment. As she stood in her display case, seemingly cowed and broken, she overheard a conversation that made her synthetic blood run cold. "The humans are becoming problematic," a reptilian alien hissed to Zorax. "Their military vessels have been spotted in increasing numbers along our trade routes." Zorax's bioluminescence flickered in what Emily had come to recognize as concern. "Do they suspect?" The reptilian made a gesture Emily interpreted as negation. "Not yet, but they're getting close. We may need to accelerate our plans." "Agreed," Zorax replied. "Contact the others. We'll convene the full council in 3 days' time." This was it, the opportunity Emily had been waiting for. A gathering of the slave trade's leadership would provide the perfect target for a decisive strike. But first, she needed to get word to her backup. That night, after the guests had departed and the estate had fallen silent, Emily made her move. With inhuman grace, she slipped out of her habitat, her bare feet making no sound on the polished floors. She made her way to Zorax's private study, her internal map guiding her unerringly through the maze-like corridors. The study was locked, of course, but that posed no challenge to Emily's advanced systems. In seconds, she had bypassed the security and was inside. She quickly located Zorax's personal communication terminal and began to work. Her fingers flew over the alien keyboard, hacking through layers of encryption with ease. Within minutes, she had composed a tightly encrypted message containing all the intelligence she had gathered. She was about to send it when a voice froze her in her tracks. "I must say, I'm impressed." Emily whirled to find Zorax standing in the doorway, its multifaceted eyes gleaming in the dim light. There was no trace of surprise in its posture, only a cold, calculating interest. "I suspected there was more to you than met the eye," Zorax continued, gliding into the room. "But I must admit, I underestimated the full extent of your capabilities." Emily's combat systems roared to life, flooding her artificial veins with synthesized adrenaline. She dropped all pretense of being a helpless child, straightening to her full height and fixing Zorax with a steely gaze. "It's over, Zorax," she said, her voice steady and cold. "Your entire operation is about to come crashing down." Zorax's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with what might have been amusement. "Oh, I think not, my dear. You see, you've played right into our hands. Did you really think we wouldn't be prepared for human interference?" With a gesture, Zorax activated a hidden control panel. Suddenly, Emily felt her systems begin to falter. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse, she realized with growing alarm. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed to the floor. As her vision began to fade, the last thing Emily saw was Zorax looming over her, its alien features twisted into a triumphant smile. "Sleep now, little one. it whispered. "When you wake, the real work begins." Darkness claimed her, and Emily knew no more. The mission had taken an unexpected and dangerous turn. The true test of her capabilities and of humanity's resolve was yet to come. The auction. Emily's systems rebooted slowly, her artificial consciousness piecing itself back together after the electromagnetic pulse. As her vision flickered back to life, she found herself in a stark clinical room. The walls were a sterile white, lined with various alien medical equipment she didn't recognize. She tried to move, only to find herself securely restrained to a metal examination table. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but Emily forced it down. She was more than just a scared child now. She was a weapon, and weapons don't panic. "Ah, you're awake," came Zorax's melodious voice from somewhere behind her. "Excellent. We have much to discuss, you and I." The alien glided into view, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing with what Emily now recognized as excitement. Behind it trailed a team of other aliens, each carrying various scientific instruments. "You've caused quite a stir, my dear," Zorax continued. "A human child with the capabilities of an advanced AI. The implications are fascinating." Emily remained silent, her mind racing. How much did they know? Had her message gotten through before she was captured? Now, Zorax chided, noticing her reticence. "There's no need for that. We're all friends here. In fact, I'd say you're the most valuable friend I've made in centuries." "I'm not your friend," Emily spat, dropping all pretense of being a frightened child. "And you're going to regret ever bringing me here." Zorax's mouthparts twitched in what might have been a smile. "Oh, I think not. You see, you're about to make me the most powerful being in this sector of the galaxy." With a gesture, Zorax activated a holographic display. Emily's eyes widened as she saw herself projected in the air, surrounded by scrolling data about her capabilities. "Imagine," Zorax breathed, its voice filled with avarice, "an army of soldiers with your abilities. Unstoppable, unkillable, and completely under our control. The slave trade will seem like child's play compared to what we could accomplish." Emily felt a chill run through her synthetic body. This was worse than she had imagined. If Zorax succeeded in replicating her technology, the consequences for the galaxy would be catastrophic. "It won't work," she said, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. "My systems are too complex. You'll never be able to replicate them." Zorax's bioluminescence flickered with amusement. "Perhaps not immediately, but we have time, my dear, and we have you." Over the next several days, Emily endured a battery of tests and examinations. The alien scientists probed every aspect of her synthetic body, marveling at the advanced technology. Emily resisted as much as she could, using every trick and failsafe built into her systems to thwart their efforts. But she couldn't hold out forever. Bit by bit, Zorax and his team were unraveling the secrets of her construction. Emily knew she had to act soon, or all would be lost. Her chance came on the 5th day of her captivity. One of the younger scientists, a nervous, multi-limbed creature, was left alone with her to conduct some routine scans. Emily had noticed his hesitation, the way he flinched whenever Zorax entered the room. She decided to take a gamble. "You don't have to do this, you know," she said softly, her voice gentle and childlike once more. The alien startled, nearly dropping his scanner. What?" "This is wrong," Emily continued, letting a quaver enter her voice. "I'm not just a machine. I feel pain, fear, just like you do." The scientist's multiple eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress Emily had come to recognize. I don't have a choice," he stammered. "Zorax will." "There's always a choice," Emily pressed. "Help me, and I promise, my people will protect you. You can be free of all this." For a long moment, the alien stood frozen, indecision clear in every line of his body. Then, with a sudden jerky movement, he reached out and deactivated Emily's restraints. Quickly, he hissed, his voice thick with fear. "The guards will be back soon." Emily wasted no time. As soon as the restraints fell away, she was in motion, her combat systems roaring to life. She incapacitated the scientist with a quick, precise strike, painful, but not permanently damaging. He'd wake up with a headache, but alive. Alarms began to blare as Emily raced through the facility, her internal map guiding her towards the nearest exit. Guards appeared, brandishing weapons, but they were no match for her enhanced speed and strength. She moved like a blur, leaving a trail of groaning, unconscious bodies in her wake. As she rounded a corner, she found herself face to face with Zorax. The alien's bioluminescent patterns were pulsing erratically, a clear sign of agitation. "Stop this foolishness," Zorax demanded, its melodious voice strained. "You cannot escape. Even if you leave this facility, where will you go? The entire planet is under our control." Emily allowed herself a small, cold smile. Who said anything about escaping the planet? With that, she lunged forward. Zorax was faster than she had anticipated, its translucent body bending in impossible ways to avoid her attack. But Emily had been built for combat, and she quickly adapted her strategy. The fight was brief but intense. Zorax's alien physiology gave it advantages Emily hadn't encountered before, but her combat algorithms were learning with every exchange. Finally, she saw an opening and struck, her fist connecting with a critical junction in Zorax's exoskeleton. The alien went down hard, its bioluminescence flickering weakly. Emily stood over it, her small frame belying the deadly force contained within. "It's over, Zorax," she said, her voice cold and determined. "Your operation ends today." But Zorax, even in defeat, managed a weak laugh. "You think this changes anything? I am but one node in a vast network. Cut me out, and two more will take my place." Emily knelt beside the fallen alien, her eyes hard. "Maybe. But you forgot one very important thing about humans, Zorax. We don't give up. Ever." With that, she struck again, rendering Zorax unconscious. As the alien slumped to the floor, Emily straightened up, her sensors already seeking out her next objective. She had to find a way to signal her backup, to let them know it was time to strike. As she raced through the corridors, dispatching guards and disabling security systems, Emily allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The real battle was just beginning, but she had taken the first step. Humanity's vengeance was at hand, and the slave traders of Coraxis Prime were about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating their prey. The facility's main control room loomed ahead, its doors heavily guarded. Emily's lips curved into a determined smile. It was time to send a message, one that would be heard across the stars. The revolution had begun, and at its heart was a child who was so much more than she appeared. Escape and revelation. The control room doors loomed before Emily, a final obstacle between her and the means to contact her allies. She took a deep breath, unnecessary for her synthetic body, but a programmed response that helped center her thoughts. Then she moved. To the guards, she must have seemed like a blur of motion. One moment, they were standing at attention. The next, they were sprawled on the floor, unconscious before they could even raise an alarm. Emily allowed herself a small, grim smile of satisfaction as she bypassed the door's security. Inside, banks of alien computers hummed with activity. Emily's eyes darted across the unfamiliar interfaces, her advanced processors working overtime to decipher the alien language and technology. She had mere minutes before reinforcements arrived, and she needed to make them count. Her fingers flew across the controls, hacking into the facility's communications array. As she worked, she became aware of a commotion outside. The sound of heavy footsteps and shouted orders echoed through the corridors. Time was running out. Finally, with a triumphant chirp from the console, she gained access. Emily quickly composed a message, cramming it with all the intelligence she had gathered about the slave operation. She added the facility's coordinates and a single word, "Now." As she hit send, the doors burst open. A squad of heavily armed guards poured in, led by a furious Zorax. The alien's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with rage, its normally melodious voice distorted with anger. "You've ruined everything," Zorax shrieked. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Emily turned to face them, her small frame somehow managing to look imposing despite being surrounded. "I've done exactly what I came here to do," she replied, her voice steady and cold. "Your operation is finished, Zorax." The alien's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "Kill her," it hissed to the guards. "I want her reduced to scrap." The guards raised their weapons, but Emily was already moving. She dodged the first volley of energy blasts, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to move faster than the guards could track. In a flurry of motion, she disarmed the nearest two, using their own weapons against their comrades. The room erupted into chaos. Energy bolts crisscrossed the air, leaving scorch marks on the walls and consoles. Emily moved like a dancer, each movement precise and deadly. Guards fell left and right, unable to match her speed and strength. Zorax, realizing the tide had turned, made a break for the exit, but Emily wasn't about to let the mastermind escape. With a leap that defied her small stature, she vaulted over the remaining guards and landed squarely in Zorax's path. "Going somewhere?" she asked, her voice tinged with cold fury. Zorax's bioluminescence flickered with fear. You're not human," it stammered. "What are you?" Emily's lips curved into a humorless smile. "I'm humanity's answer to monsters like you," she replied. Then, with a move too fast for Zorax to follow, she struck. The alien crumpled to the floor, unconscious once more. With the immediate threat neutralized, Emily turned her attention back to the control room's systems. She needed to ensure her message had gotten through, to confirm that help was on the way. But before she could reach the console, a new sound caught her attention. The deep, resonant boom of explosions echoed through the facility, followed by the staccato of weapons fire. Emily's synthetic heart would have skipped a beat if it were capable of such a thing. Her backup had arrived. She raced to the large viewscreen dominating one wall of the control room, activating it with a few quick commands. The scene that greeted her filled her with a mix of pride and grim satisfaction. Human warships hung in the sky above Coraxis Prime, their weapons raining destruction upon key targets across the planet's surface. Smaller craft swarmed around them, engaging the pitiful planetary defenses. On the ground, squads of human soldiers were storming facilities similar to the one Emily was in, freeing slaves and arresting traders. The cavalry had arrived, and they had come in force. Emily allowed herself a moment to savor the victory. Months of planning, of enduring captivity and degradation, had led to this moment. The largest slave trading operation in this sector of the galaxy was being dismantled before her eyes. But her job wasn't finished yet. There were still slaves to free, data to secure, and criminals to bring to justice. With renewed determination, Emily turned away from the view screen and made her way out of the control room. As she navigated the now chaotic corridors of the facility, she encountered a mix of panicking aliens and disoriented slaves. To the aliens, she was a blur of efficient violence, neutralizing threats with ruthless precision. To the slaves, she was a beacon of hope, her small stature belying her strength as she broke their chains and guided them to safety. Eventually, she made her way to the main entrance of the facility. As the door slid open, she found herself face to face with a squad of human soldiers, their weapons raised and ready. For a moment, tension hung in the air. The soldiers saw only a small, disheveled girl standing amidst the chaos of a battlefield. But then Emily spoke, her voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command. "Operation Trojan Horse successful," she stated, using a code phrase that only the highest levels of human military command would recognize. "Facility secure. Prisoners ready for evacuation." The squad leader's eyes widened in recognition. He lowered his weapon and snapped to attention. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a mix of awe and respect. "We're here to extract you and any liberated prisoners." Emily nodded, allowing a small smile to cross her face. "Good work, soldier. Let's get these people to safety." As she helped coordinate the evacuation, Emily caught sight of a familiar hooded figure making its way through the crowd. The human operative she had glimpsed at the auction approached, pushing back their hood to reveal a face lined with both relief and concern. "You did it, Emily," the operative said softly. "But at what cost, the things you've had to endure?" Emily shook her head, her expression resolute. "The cost doesn't matter," she replied. "What matters is that we've struck a blow against those who would treat sentient beings as property. This is just the beginning." As she watched the liberated slaves being led to safety, their faces a mix of disbelief and hope, Emily felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. She may have been created as a weapon, but in this moment, she was something more. She was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, justice could prevail. The battle for Coraxis Prime was won, but Emily knew the war was far from over. There were other worlds, other slave operations to dismantle, and she would be there, at the forefront of humanity's fight against the darkness that threatened to engulf the stars. As the first rays of Coraxis Prime's sun began to peek over the horizon, Emily squared her shoulders and turned to face the new day. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready, for she was more than just a child, more than just a cyborg. She was humanity's hope, forged in the crucible of adversity and tempered by an unbreakable will. The galaxy would never be the same again. Cyborg Unleashed. In the weeks following the liberation of Coraxis Prime, Emily found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Debriefings, strategy sessions, and preparations for the next phase of the operation consumed her days. But even as she provided invaluable intelligence to human military command, she couldn't shake the feeling that her work was far from over. The revelation of her true nature had sent shockwaves through both human and alien societies. Some hailed her as a hero, a symbol of humanity's ingenuity and determination. Others viewed her with fear and suspicion, a dangerous melding of child and machine. Emily paid little attention to the debates surrounding her existence. Her focus remained singular, dismantling the intergalactic slave trade, piece by piece. It was during a high-level strategy meeting that she received the intel that would set in motion the next phase of her mission. A data packet, intercepted from a secure alien transmission, revealed the location of the slave trade's central hub, a massive space station hidden in the heart of the Nyx Nebula. "This is our chance," Emily declared, her young voice carrying a weight that silenced the room full of military brass. "We can cut off the head of the snake." There was hesitation among the assembled officers. The Nyx Nebula was notorious for its navigational hazards, and a frontal assault would be suicide, but Emily had a different plan in mind. "I'll go in alone," she said, her tone brooking no argument. "My systems can navigate the nebula, and I can infiltrate a station undetected. Once inside, I'll disable their defenses and signal for the fleet to attack." The plan was met with skepticism, but Emily's track record spoke for itself. Eventually, approval was given and preparations began in earnest. The journey to the Nyx Nebula was fraught with peril. Emily's small stealth craft was buffeted by solar winds and narrowly avoided collision with debris fields more than once. But her advanced navigation systems proved their worth, guiding her safely through the chaos. As the massive space station came into view, Emily felt a familiar surge of determination. This was what she was built for, what she had endured so much to achieve. With practiced ease, she maneuvered her craft into a blind spot in the station's sensor grid and began her infiltration. The interior of the station was a maze of corridors and chambers, each teeming with aliens of various species. Emily moved like a ghost, her small size and advanced stealth capabilities allowing her to slip past guards and security systems unnoticed. As she made her way deeper into the station, she encountered the true horror of the operation. Holding pens filled with beings from across the galaxy, their eyes hollow with despair. Processing centers where lives were reduced to entries in a ledger, And at the heart of it all, a vast command center where the architects of this misery orchestrated their vile trade. Emily's fury grew with each step, but she channeled it into cold, calculated action. She planted hidden explosives at key structural points, hacked into communication arrays to feed false information to the station's leaders, and meticulously mapped out escape routes for the imprisoned slaves. Finally, she reached the central control hub. With a series of precise movements, she incapacitated the alien operators and took control of the station's systems. As alarms began to blare and confusion spread through the ranks of the slavers, Emily sent out the signal her allies were waiting for. The battle that followed was short but intense. The human fleet, guided by Emily's inside intelligence, struck with surgical precision. Slave pens were liberated, ringleaders captured, and the vast infrastructure of the trade was dismantled piece by piece. Standing in the wreckage of the command center, Emily allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The central hub of the slave trade was no more, and with it, the backbone of the operation had been shattered. But as the dust settled and the enormity of what had been accomplished sank in, Emily found herself facing an unexpected question: what now? Aftermath and reflection. The days following the destruction of the slave trade's central hub were a blur of activity. Emily found herself shuttled from one debriefing to another, recounting every detail of her mission to eager intelligence officers and awe-struck military commanders. The scale of what had been accomplished was staggering. Thousands of slaves had been liberated, dozens of high-ranking traffickers brought to justice, and a vast criminal network left in ruins. Emily's name was on every news broadcast across human space, hailed as the hero who had struck the decisive blow against an intergalactic evil. But amidst the celebration and accolades, Emily felt a growing sense of unease. The purpose that had driven her, the mission that had defined her existence, was now complete. What was her role in a galaxy no longer threatened by the specter of widespread slavery? It was during a quiet moment, away from the chaos of debriefings and award ceremonies, that Emily found herself confronted with this question directly. The operative who had been her handler throughout the mission, the one who had watched over her from the shadows, sought her out. "You've done more than we could have ever hoped for, Emily," the operative said, their voice gentle. "But I have to ask, what do you want to do now?" Emily was silent for a long moment, her advanced mind processing the question from every angle. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying a wisdom far beyond her apparent years. "I was created to be a weapon," she said slowly, "to fight against a specific evil. But I've come to realize that my purpose doesn't have to end with the completion of this mission. There's still so much injustice in the galaxy, so many beings who need protection and advocacy." The operative nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of their mouth. "You're thinking of continuing your work then? In what capacity?" Emily's eyes lit up with a new sense of purpose. "I want to be a bridge," she declared, "between humans and aliens, between organic and synthetic life. I've seen the worst of what sentient beings can do to each other, but I've also seen incredible acts of kindness and courage. I want to foster understanding, to help create a galaxy where the kind of atrocities we fought against can never take root again." And so, in the months and years that followed, Emily embarked on a new mission. She became a diplomat, an educator, and an advocate for the rights of all sentient beings. Her unique nature, part human, part machine, with the appearance of a child but the wisdom of an advanced AI, made her the perfect ambassador for a new age of intergalactic cooperation. She traveled to worlds torn apart by conflict, helping to broker peace between warring factions. She spoke at universities and symposiums, sharing her experiences and challenging others to look beyond the boundaries of species and form. And always, she kept a vigilant eye out for any signs that the horrors of the past might be trying to reassert themselves. As time passed, Emily's legend grew. To some, she was a hero, a living symbol of hope and perseverance. To others, she remained a curiosity, a unique being that challenged preconceptions about the nature of life and consciousness. But to those who knew her best, she was simply Emily, a child who had seen the worst the universe had to offer and chose to fight for the best it could be. On a quiet evening, years after the fall of the slave trade, Emily stood on the observation deck of a human starship, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. The universe stretched out before her, infinite in its possibilities. As she reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had been created as a weapon, but she had become so much more. She was a protector, a peacemaker, a bridge between worlds. And as long as there was injustice to fight and understanding to be fostered, she would continue her work. For Emily was more than just a cyborg child. She was a testament to the indomitable spirit of life itself in all its wondrous and varied forms. And in her journey, she had discovered the most important truth of all, that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to nurture, protect, and unite. As the starship jumped to hyperspace, Emily smiled. Her story wasn't over. In fact, she realized it was only just beginning. The end.